Hey guys, I'm Sean from BlueHub, and today I'm going to be covering inventory and products, how we can set them up, what the different fields mean, and different configurations we have available to us when actually setting up our product. So firstly, where we find products, if we click inventory, and then we can go onto the search module here and press products to find our product listings. Now these are going to be all of our products. This is just the existence of the product. It doesn't mean this is the physical stock. The physical stock will be stored against a location in dir and be held separately. So this is just the actual setup of the product itself and not the physical items. From here we can then click into any products we want to edit by just pressing click on them, or we can press the plus button up here to create a new product, which I'm going to be doing. From there you'll get the following UI, and I'll go through all of that with you now and explain the different aspects. So starting with the top left, we have our SKU, which is going to be your unique identifier for the product. Due to the fact it is the unique identifier, every SKU will need to be unique. So in this example, I'll just put SKU example. I believe there is a 255 character limit on the SKU, or it may be a 50 character limit. I will double check that. 1 second. Yep, so our SKU is limited to 50 characters. Which we can have in here, and then our product name directly below, which does not have to be unique. You can have multiple products with the same name as long as the SKU is unique. In here we can have 256 characters, so we can have a much longer description within there. Next we have our product type. So within here we have a couple of options, including non-inventory, service, stock, gift card, and fixed asset. Typically, we don't recommend you use fixed asset or gift cards because they don't really play well with discounts or zero. So we typically stick to stock, service, and non-inventory. The use of a fixed asset, though, is essentially you can have an item that you own and you rent out, and then you can earn money or profit from having that item loaned out, and place purchase orders against it and have it come back into stock and things like that. Gift cards are a different way of doing discounts, where you can create a gift card. You can have it consumed and used, and that's going to give a discount to your client. So the other three options, which are going to be our main options, stock, service, and non-inventory. Stock is anything that you're holding physical stock of that you want to track. It's a physical item that you have somewhere in your warehouse and you can go and physically pick up, and it has a quantity-based stock against it. Now it doesn't matter if that quantity on the stock is meters squared, whether that's a physical one item or whether it's a cubic space. As long as there is a physical entity there, it will be stock. Alternatively, if you aren't tracking the amount of that stock that you have there, so you know there is something there but you don't want to track the amount, you just want to place purchase orders against it and measure it by eye, it would be non-inventory. So non-inventory just means that the system is always going to presume it's there and in stock, and so it's going to put in I believe just a buffer number of 9999 at all times, so it views it as you always having that stock. You can still place purchase orders against non-inventory items to say that you're purchasing 10, 20, 30. It's just not going to add to an actual stock number. The final option here is a service item, which is different to the previous two in that it has no physical, it isn't for physical items. A service item is for anything that you want to have a name against that you can put on invoices to charge for. Whether this be a purchase invoice or a sales invoice, it doesn't matter. These can be used on both, and an example of it might be a freight charge, which you might have as a service item so that you can allocate £2.50 to your purchase orders based on a freight charge. The customers or suppliers, whoever's on the invoice or receives the invoice, can then actually see that, but it can be hidden if you want it to be. 1 second, I'm just going to close Teams just because it's making a lot of errors or notifications. Now that our item types are covered, we can then go into our categories. Our categories are a mandatory field in dir, and if we do an import and we don't provide a category, it is going to default to the other category. Other than that, a category can be whatever you want it to be. It can be renamed to anything, and you can add as many of these into the system as you like. As you can see here, we have quite a few. Categories do need to be unique, obviously, because if two items have the same category, they're going to be branded together. And let me just check how big the character limit for a category is. The character limit for a category is 256 characters, so you can have a length of up to 256 characters for these different categories. brand is going to be used in the exact same way. What that means is you can apply it against a product. You can use it to filter on different reports, and you can just use it as a general search term for your products. And within here, it's just going to be essentially category repeated, 256 characters, and you can add whatever you want in here. It is labeled as a brand, so that is its intended use is to have your category on your brand. However, you can do any combination of searchable fields here you'd like. It doesn't have to be brand. Next, we have our costing method, which is a very important one. It can be split out into 3 different types of costing method within dir: FIFO, FIFO, and special. Now the difference between these is the way your stock moves into your warehouse and then out of your warehouse. If you're using the FIFO method, it's going to be the first item that you received into your warehouse is going to be the first to leave. If you're using the FIFO method, it's going to be the first to expire in your warehouse is going to be the first to leave. And if you're using the special method, you can select via batch or serial number exactly which serial or batch you want to go in or out, rather than having it auto generate these for you. The other option within here against FIFO, FIFO, and special is the option to have it either standard for FIFO, so there's no serial numbers or batch numbers, having a serial number for FIFO, FIFO, or special, or having a batch number for FIFO, FIFO, or special. The benefits to having these serial and batch numbers are that you can trace items from when they're purchased all the way to when they're sold. It's especially common in production jobs. Whenever you're doing production, you typically use a batch or a serial number on your finished product. And that's going to split out your stock within dir by batch or serial number. If you give me 2 seconds, I'll go to the availability screen and show you what that would look like. Here on our availability screen, which is our stock report within dir, we can use our batch and serial number here, and we can identify our different batches and serial numbers. As you can see, these are multiple of the same product. However, we can separate them within our inventory based on our batch, so that we can see that this PO or this item was worth £166 and we have 1 of it. Against this serial number or batch, it was also worth £166 and we still have 1 of it. However, if any of these had different pricing or different amounts in stock, we could track them as individual products essentially, rather than them being the same SKU. Alternatively, if we ever didn't want to see that and we wanted to hide it because we was using the report more generally, we have the option up here to consolidate our batch numbers. As you'll see, they will have all disappeared now. So that's kind of an overview of how the batch and serial numbers can be used. It probably needs its own video more so, going into depth on it. However, that is a brief overview for you. Back to our products here then. The next option we have is our unit of measure. Now our unit of measure, for the most part, is just going to be a reference field within dir that's going to determine what you purchase and consume your good in. So if you're only purchasing and consuming the good in 1 unit of measure, i.e. you're buying it as an item, you're selling it as an item, then nothing really needs to be done here. You can just specify how it's going to be used. The same could be said if you was going to purchase in something like square or cubic feet. You might want to also consume in square or cubic feet, and therefore it's a 1-to-1 ratio on what you're selling and what you're buying. The unit of measure will then appear so the client can see that when they're buying a quantity of 1, it's actually a 1 cubic feet of the product. Well, this can get a little bit more complicated is where you start adding in different units of measure into the mix. So if you was purchasing in cubic feet and selling in square feet, for example, then it can become a little bit more complicated and will require bombs in order to compensate for that. So if you are planning to do some sort of conversion, do keep in mind that it can add a bit of complexity. Next here we have drop shipping. So drop shipping is when we are purchasing from our supplier, who is then going to ship the good to our client for us. So we don't have to handle any of the fulfillment or shipping ourselves. Within dir, we can select products to be optional dropship, always dropship, or no dropship. If we do turn on dropshipping for the item, either optional or always, we will need to specify in the suppliers page which suppliers are actually going to be dropshipping for us. So a supplier will either be a dropshipping supplier or a non-dropshipping supplier. From there, you can then, if you use the select optional dropship, you have the option to specify whether you want that supplier to dropship it for you on the sales order. And if you use the click always dropship, it's going to force it to always be dropshipped on the sales order. What that will do is once you've authorized your sales order and it's a dropshipped item, it's going to create a purchase order for you from that supplier with the customer's destination or location to be shipped to, and then it will just give you the option to mark that as received once you've had the notification from your supplier that it has actually reached the customer. Next, we have bill of materials. Bill of materials is for anything where you're consuming a part in order to make a finished product. This splits this out into 3 different options. Assembly bombs, which are for simple bills of materials, so you're putting a pack together, you're putting 2 pens together in a pen case, something like that. Whereas production bomb is much more advanced and is going to be used for things like building vehicles, for engineering parts, anything like that. These are quite complex in terms of which one you actually need to use, and if you do have any queries on that, this is what we at BlueHub do. We do scoping sessions and help guide you to the correct choice on that matter, so do get in touch. Finally, we have make to order bombs, and these are the same as production bombs, with the only difference being you can set up multiple options within the bomb in terms of like drop downs, where you can select which type you want. So you could either have maybe a strawberry or a vanilla cake against the same SKU, so you're just selling cake, but you can actually change the bill of materials to be either strawberry or vanilla. That one can be quite complicated to set up, and my recommendation is it typically shouldn't be used just because it is so complicated to set up. However, if you have quite a simple make to order bomb you're trying to make, it can be useful to have. Next, we have our short description, which is just going to be a short description of our product. I believe this can be up to 256 characters long. Once again, give me 2 seconds to double check that. Okay, so the short description is actually 500 characters, has a 500 character limit, and you can put whatever you would like into there and pull it out onto different reports or different comments, depending on if you would like the customer to see it on the invoices and things like that or not. We then have the description, which is a longer version of description. Usually we would use this to push to different e-commerce sites or integrations plugged into Deer. This description can be unlimited in terms of length. And as you can see, there's a HTML mode, meaning you can customize what you're actually putting in here to have different font types, different sizes, and things like that. So when it pushes to the e-commerce sites, it looks a bit better. And finally, we have our internal note, which is going to have the same properties as the description, except for this one isn't going to push to anything. It's purely for our own use. And this one is going to have a character limit of 4,000 characters. Moving back up to the top again, we're onto our accounts now. So what this allows you to do is overwrite the default accounts you have within Deer with specific accounts based on the product. So just to give you a more clear concept of how that works in general before we move on to the details here, in Deer, when you're setting up a accounting platform that will tie into Deer, you will have to assign a default inventory account, a default revenue account, and a default cost of goods account, along with every other account that Deer needs. And all orders by default are going to go into those accounts. So when we buy SKU example, it's going to go into our default inventory account. When we sell it, the value is going to go to our default revenue account. And when any cost of goods values that were allocated during are going to go into our default cost of goods account. At this point, instead of having it so that it goes to those default accounts, per product we can overwrite these values so that for this product specifically, it's going to go into different accounts. So for example here, we can change our inventory account so it goes into our 611 account instead of our 620 account, which is our default. We can also specify it so that instead of going into our revenue, our general sales account, we can have it go into our other revenue account. And I've seen some companies, even at this point, make new revenue accounts based on product categories. So we'd have a product category in here of, let's say, cakes, and we could have a revenue account specific for cakes if we wanted to. This means that when we sell this product, it's going to go into a different revenue account when it goes into things like Xero, and that's going to allow us to report on our actual sales more accurately and get more useful data out of it. Finally, the same for the cost of goods account. We can specify where our cost of goods is going to go, whether that's going to go into cost of goods sold for the product, or whether we want it to go into something like wages, which can be useful if it's a service type product. Next, we have tax rules. Now, these are very important because our tax rules in Deer are usually going to be dictated by our customer or supplier, similar to how our cost of goods are dictated by our general rule up until this point. Our tax rules are going to be dictated by our customer or supplier up until we overwrite them at this point. If we do overwrite them here, This is going to override any customer or supplier tax rules and specify that this has to be the tax rule for this item. Now the reason this is here is some items are specifically don't have tax rules against them. The example we like to use commonly here is children's books. They will be tax exempt all the time. Due to that, there is allowed you here to then override any tax rules if this specific product has a tax overriding law against it. So please bear in mind whenever you're setting this up that this is only for those times where that tax rule will override everything else. Next, we have product discounts here. So as you can see in here, we have a list of different discounts we can use. These can be set up on the back end of Deer, and we'll have a separate video out just for setting those up. However, for a given product, we can specify a discount that has been set up on the back end to go against it by default. So for example, we can have a 30% discount on this product by default if we want to. We then have a stock locator field. This is used for locating the product. It will pull onto any pick lists and things like that. So whatever we put in here is just a hard-coded free text field we can use for specifying where this product can be found in the warehouse. What I often see people use this for is things like overflow bins, where you're not looking at the actual stock in Deer, which will be printed out for you anyway, where you want to have a list of places it could be otherwise. That's where this may be useful. Next, we have our warranty rules, which once again, they'll be set up on the back end. We will have a separate video on that. But here you are allowed to select a warranty that applies to this product, and when you make a sale, it will then fall under that warranty's terms. These bottom two fields here are some new fields to Deer, including our HS code and our country of origin code. These can be pulled onto reports and are very useful for reporting on our sales and doing things like our interstat report. Going back to the top, we have our active status here, and this is what we use in Deer for determining whether a product is archived or not. So within here we have a active status, meaning this is a sellable product, a deprecated product, meaning it has now been archived, or a setup required product, meaning we're still actually setting this up, so we don't want it to appear on any sales lists yet. So since we are still setting it as up, we can do setup required. Here we can specify a default location, and this is going to allow you to specify where you want to put this product away when it's been purchased or produced. This goes to the level of bins, so as you can see here we have, for example, factory bin 1, and we can then specify which bin we want to place this into when it is purchased or produced. You can then override this if you want to on the purchase order receiving lines, but this is just going to make it super clean and easy for you if your products always go to the same place to direct them there without having to manually do everything. So we can select that one for now. Next, we have our additional attribute sets. There is probably once again going to be a full video covering this, but providing we have set up a additional attribute set on the back end, we can use this to add in additional custom fields to Deer that we wouldn't otherwise have access to. So now that I've added that, you'll see that our tabs on the left side here changed, and we've now gained one for additional attributes. If we click into that, we can see that this additional attribute set has one free text field in it for us, known as buyer limit, which we can then come into and customize and add any value we want into that we could possibly want. Should probably change that to like 999. The benefit of this is just adding in reporting fields or reference fields into Deer that you otherwise wouldn't have access to, and it can make for quite useful it can be very useful for reporting on things that Deer wouldn't otherwise let you access. The only downside to this is isn't going to, they won't have any rules against them, so any additional attributes do have to be manually added or manually entered into the system or imported based on the spreadsheets. Next here we have our barcode. If you already have pre-existing barcodes and you're moving to Deer, you can just enter that value into here, the value behind the barcode. Or if you are new to Deer and this is your first system where you're going to be using barcoding, any text value that you put into this field will work. It's up to you what kind of laws and things like that you want to obey around your barcoding, but any text value you put into this barcode field, when you print out a label within Deer, is going to be converted into a barcode for you. So as long as this value is unique, it will always reference back to this item. Next, we have our minimum before reorder and our reorder quantities. So these are used for our keeping up our stock levels up and our reorder report. And what we would want to put in here is a minimum before reorder of the lowest amount of stock we want to have, and then a reorder quantity of how much you'd want to purchase at that time. That reorder quantity can always be overwrote. This is just the generic rule you want to follow for your standard purchasing. These items, if you add the two numbers together as well, if you are using the MRP, if not, please ignore this, they will make up your stock level value. So the minimum amount you ever want to have in stock will be the combination of these two numbers. So that's worth keeping in mind, that they will work differently on the reorder report and the MRP runs if you are using the MRP. Next, we have tags. Tags are very similar to things like description or categories, where we can just add in any value we want here and use it as a reporting aspect. So I could put a test in here, for example, and press enter, and that's going to give it a tag of test. That will then be usable on reports, and we can filter by any products that have the test tag, and they will all come into the same listing. So it's worth keeping that in mind. It's very strong for reporting in terms of what products you want to pull up, and you can have as many, well, not as many tags in there as you want, but a lot of tags within there. Next, we have our pick zones. This is going to be similar to our stock locator field. This is mainly used for, once again, pulling onto our pick list so that we can direct our warehouse staff to the right location. The way we typically use a pick zone is, say, we're going to pick it from this room or this part of the building, so they know what area they're going to pick, so it makes it easier to find the bin. And then finally, our last field on here is, am I selling this product? Yes or no. So this is used if this is a component product consumed within a bill of materials. You would not want to have it appear on your invoices, so you'd say, no, I'm not selling it. If this is an item you're ever going to put onto an order or an invoice, you would always want it to be yes. But if it's never ever going to appear on an order or an invoice, that's when you can then add that as a no, I'm not selling this product. Either way, it's still going to appear on your purchase orders for you, so you can bring it into stock. That's going to be everything on our general page. The rest of this is a bit more specific, so I'm going to go over it a bit more high level. But I hope this was helpful in terms of understanding the core concepts within DIR. Things like the unit of measure and the costing method can get quite confusing, so please use this time to go back and watch it multiple times if required. Next, we have our pricing list within DIR. So DIR allows you to hold up to 10 prices for a single product. As you can see here, we have 1 through 10. These can be renamed within the general settings. So as you can see here also, we've named ours to retail price, trade, wholesale, distributor, etc. So whatever works best for you in terms of what you want them to be called, you can rename it to. You can then assign these different price tiers to your customers. So you can have retail customers, trade customers, wholesale customers, and they will then receive the relevant price based on their price tier. You can also do calculated pricing within DIR. It's not exactly the strongest suit of DIR, but you can use calculated pricing and do things like markups on the average cost, on the fixed price, on the latest price, or on the price tier value, if you would like to. Moving on, we then have the stock. So if we had any of this item in stock, here we could see the actual items we do have in stock. We could see the bin, where it's stored at, the batch or serial number if provided, the warehouse it's stored in, the value of the stock on hand, etc. If I press save now, we should get a couple of more options appear on our left side here, like so. Next is going to be alternative products. So this is used in bill of materials typically. What we can do here is we can add in a similar product within the system that can be used in place of this product if we want. So in manufacturing, for example, if you have two bolts that are very similar, you can make these interchangeable, and that's going to give you the option to then select that on any bills of materials if you have one item in stock and not the other. And there is also a alternative products on sales orders if you want to drop down and see what products you could use in the stead of the product that you want to be selling. There is also a likeness factor on the right here. So the higher this number, if you had a list of compatible products, the one with the highest number would be used in place since it's the most similar. You can also use a quantity here on the right. So if this was one product and two of this other product if this was one product and two of this product could match it, you can set the quantity here to 2, and then it would consume 2 of the other product in place of this one main product. Next, we have our additional attributes. as we discussed, we can have up to 10 of these additional attributes, and these are just free text fields where you can store any value you want. The downside to this is that on any reports, they are just going to appear as additional attribute 1 through 10, and they won't bring in these names that you give them as custom names. So that is the one downside. You do have to remember what those attribute names are. It's not going to pull into your reports for you. Next, we have suppliers. So the way DIR works is there won't be a cost against a product. There will be an average cost within the system against the product, but there won't be a cost that you can pull onto purchase orders against the product. There will be the cost is held against the supplier against the product. So if we come into our supplier section, first we would have to add a supplier to the mix. So for example, I will just add this Alco one. And from there, you'll see that we then get more information populated based on the supplier. So firstly, we can add lead times for the supplier, so how long it's going to take for the items to be delivered. If you are using scheduling and things like the MRP, that will be a very useful value for you. You can then use safety stock, so a minimum stock level, which is once again going to be used in your inventory velocity report this time. And it's going to make sure that you never fall below that safety value and recommend your purchases based on that safety value. We then have a reorder quantity, and that's going to be the amount that you're going to reorder for your reorder report. On the right here, we have a minimum order quantity, which is a very useful field that everyone always looks to use and wants their reordering done in this value. However, this is purely going to be a reference field that you can find when you're actually creating your purchase orders, and it won't be able to be found used or functionally used in any kind of way. It's just purely for reference. So do keep that in mind. Then on our right here, we can specify all of the information we just saw against each of our individual warehouses within the system. So for example, a useful feature of this might be against our consignment stock warehouse, we may have a 1-day lead time, but against our DuraCurve warehouse, we may have a 2-day lead time. And we may also need more safety stock within this DuraCurve warehouse, since it's got a longer lead time, and less in our consignment stock, since it has a shorter lead time. So that's some of the kind of use cases you'd have for that. If you don't want to go to that level though, you can just set it up generally at the top against our supplier, where we can then add in our latest price, our fixed price, and a currency based on the supplier, and whether they're going to be drop shipping or not, as we discussed earlier. On the left here, you can also add a supplier SKU. So if when you send them a purchase order or purchase invoice, you want it to show their own SKU so they know what product to send you, you can supply that here, and it can be stored additionally to your SKU that you're using for the product. And you can have multiple of these in the system if you want to, so you can have different SKUs for each supplier if you wanted to. That's going to be everything in terms of suppliers, other than the fact that on the back end of the system, you can specify whether you want the system to use the fixed or latest price. The benefit to using a fixed price is that it's always going to pull through the same, and you'll always have that as a reference. However, if you use the latest price and the prices change, it's going to be easier to update, because if you use a new price on your purchase order, it's going to automatically update to that latest price, and then that will be the default going forwards until it changes again. So that's something you want to consider, which of these two options you want to use, but both can be it can be edited on which you want to use in the general settings. Next, we have custom pricing. So this is the next level layer we can add to our pricing on top of discounts and the pricing tiers. In here, we can specify unique pricing for a specific customer, such as, in this case, I'll say basket case. It's then going to show me that customer's currency, and I can add in a unique fixed price or latest price for that customer. Actually, we can't change the latest price for that customer. We can add in a custom price for them here, and their latest price will populate to help us kind of determine what we want to add. There is also an autofill option. I'm not really sure the benefit of doing the autofill option, but it will allow you to, it may assist you in setting this up. This is probably the strongest pricing feature in terms of the fact that you can set any price against any customer. So even if they have volumetric discounts and things like that, you can just account for it by just adding in custom prices for them, rather than trying to work it out via discounts. However, a lot of setup will go into this, as you'll need to do this for every single customer if you are doing it. Moving on from here, we have our reorder levels. So here we can just supply, similar to what I showed you in the previous screen, specific reorder quantities and reorder levels per location. So if you had 2 warehouses, you can specify that you want to have a minimum stock value of 10 in one warehouse and 20 in the other. This is just useful for keeping different warehouses stocked for different amounts based on size and capacity. Next, we have movements. This is used for tracking any sales, purchases, or transfers of stock, and it's just going to be an all-encompassing place where you can find any information out about that stock you want. You can also change this so that it shows the quantity or the value of the movements, so you can see where exactly money has been added to this stock, or where exactly it's been taken away based on sales or things like that. It's going to be all-encompassing, so any issues you find in your stock values, you can track there. Next we have our discounts. So within here we can just specify discounts against different customers. So as you saw in the general options, we could specify discounts for the product. In this section we can specify discounts against specific customers or customer groups, which will allow us to have an extra level of detail on that discounting option. You do have to be careful with this though, because if you add too many of these into the system, it can start to cause slowness of the system if you're saying adding 10 per customer and things like that, and it can start to cause things like the POS not to function correctly. Next we have images and attachments. Within here we can add in any JPEGs, which will then become the thumbnail for the product, or well, any image files which will then become the thumbnail for the product. We add in things like PDFs and Word documents and such. You can add a lot of different kinds of files in here, to the point where I don't know the limit of the files, but some files won't go in. An example of this could be you can't actually attach a CAD file in against this image and attachments location, but you can against a production BOM. So there are some weird rules behind it. It's kind of better just to have a play of it and find out if you can attach what you want essentially, and if not, you'll have to figure a way around that. But that is what it is. As far as I'm aware, there's no documentation listing exactly what images or files can be attached here. Next, we have additional units of measure. So as I discussed earlier when I got to the units of measure point, if you are purchasing and selling in different or purchasing and consuming in different units of measure, this is where you can then specify that. And the way you would do it is by either creating a new product or selecting an existing product, so a different SKU, that is the other unit of measure, and then you can begin to add in a conversion rate by using different numbers of that item. So if I create a product, it's going to use my current SKU. I can then add in a different unit of measure that exists within the system, such as a box, and you'll see that that name creates me a new SKU based on my new unit of measure automatically. From there, we can then say the amount of this item that is going to make up our current item. So we can say that 6 of that item go into this item, for example, a box of 6. We can then say we are selling this product, but if we aren't selling this product, we can use that as a bill of materials component, and we can mark that as not being sold because we're going to purchase in a box of 6, for example, and then disassemble it down into our individual components. Next, additional descriptions. This is used if we're connecting to any external e-commerce shops such as Shopify, WooCommerce, or Magento. Any descriptions that have been pulled through by the integration will then appear here so you can see what is being displayed on that website. Finally, we have channels, which is the same thing as you can see here. I'm linked to these different integrations. If it's been sold on those integrations, we can then see if it's been sold or how many is stocked there, and we can also list it from here as well by clicking the list button. The final item we have here is available in every aspect of Deer. It's our activity log, and it's going to show you everything and anything to do with this product. When stock's been added, when stock's been removed, any changes that have been made, anything like that will all be trackable here. So any errors that you're finding, come here and have a look, and it will probably be useful for solving any issues you find. My voice is starting to go now, and I think I've covered everything in terms of setup of a product. If you have any questions, please let me know. Other than that, I think I've covered everything, and I'm looking forward to hearing any thoughts, comments, or maybe additional features that you'd like to request. Obviously, don't request them to us, but it's nice to see what the community would like out of our products. That'll be all from me for today, and I will look forward to speaking to you next time. Bye.